Weirdest one that I've seen was a hot metal ladle crane trolley break in half.
How does that happen?
For your own safety, you are reminded to stand behind the yellow line.
How to make sure your don't break. If you're in charge of uptime at your facility, this podcast is for you. Today, we're talking about what can go wrong with your crane and how you can avoid it. Welcome to Safety Factor. My name is Ben. Gentlemen, would you mind introducing yourself? Tell me a little bit about your background in the industry.
Sure. My name's Tim Gatos. I work for Mazzella, Piedmont. I've been in the industry for about 19 years, from service, now in sales. So,
Kevin Brewer. I'm the director of crane service for Mazzella Companies. I've been in the crane industry for about 28 years. Been in service, sales, done a little bit of everything from one end to the other in the crane business.
Jim Warren. I am the director of steel segment. I've been in the business, almost 30 years.
So I'm sure that you've seen a lot of interesting failures with cranes. So can you guys tell me, what is the weirdest failure that you've seen with an overhead crane? What caused it?
So I'll go first, I guess. The weirdest one that I've seen was a hot metal ladle crane trolley break in half.
How does that happen?
Literally fatigue, right? Going through different cycles and lifting upwards of capacity a lot, and just not, I don't want to, because some people might not know who this customer was, but not doing great inspections, right?
the thing I've seen a couple times is just operators not paying attention, getting loads swinging, and then two-block and hoist. And when two-block hoist, it's very bad. Cable breaks, and you drop the load. So, and you damage the hoist. So, not good.
How about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I've seen everything from the two blocks hoist. I haven't seen a broken trolley, but I have seen a bridge run off the end of a runway and fall to the ground. So that was probably one of the strangest breakdown calls.
Stops on there, or?
No, they ran through the end stops. So we got a breakdown call that our crane is on the ground. So it's kind of hard to do much about that one.
So today we're going to talk about kind of some common problems that might occur with an overhead crane, what you can do to hopefully avoid them, and some common mistakes that people make when they're purchasing cranes. So what are probably the most common problems that you see with overhead cranes?
Well, for me, the thing that I see the most is when people buy cranes, they buy them and they're not applied correctly. So people will buy a package hoist, something that's just light duty, not made for that duty cycle, and it just doesn't last. I mean, it's just not ever gonna, it wasn't designed to do that. And then that just causes a handful of problems that it never gets better until you replace that crane. Because
so you think they're buying on the wrong duty cycle then?
Yes,
yeah.
Definitely.
And so they're buying on price then?
Yep, price.
Right.
And just salespeople, some sales guys, they don't know, right? They don't know what they don't know, and they're just, and then your service guys are there, and they're constantly, they're like, why isn't this thing holding up? Well, your duty cycle is never sized right. You know, your service factors are really low. Going through bearings. Oh, I don't know why the gearbox is leaking. Well, probably because that sucker's hot, you know? So it just causes so much problems.
So how can you avoid that? You can't really avoid bad salesperson, or can you?
So, let me ask you something, Tim. Do you think that it's because salespeople don't know, or do you think it's more because they don't care, or both?
It could be both. I mean, I have a saying, you know, either you didn't know or you didn't care. Which one was it?
Yeah.
You know, right? And maybe it's somewhat of both, right? But mainly, we need to be salespeople. We need to be in front of our customer and educate them on, no, you don't want this. Okay.
Yep.
I know the price is more to buy something, but it's going to save you so much money and uptime in the future. So
I always say when I'm talking with account managers and everything that our job, number one, is to make our customers look good, right? But number two is to discern what their wants are and whether their wants are exactly what their needs are, and figure that out, and then actually give them proposals for what they need, not what they want. right? And that's what we're supposed to do as professionals.
That's right.
So
Yeah, no, I totally agree. The duty cycle is probably the biggest single factor that causes crane service problems. Most cranes, and it's an education thing, whether the salesperson that's selling the crane isn't educated properly and doesn't understand duty cycles, or like I said, whether they don't care and they don't want to learn. They're just out there to try to, hey, I'm going to make this sale today and I'm going to be the cheapest one and I'm going to win the order and then I'm going to move on to the next one and I don't care about the end result of the customer. And from a service perspective, if you're trying to keep a crane that's sold with the wrong duty cycle and it's underrated, not by capacity but by duty cycle, you're never going to make that crane what it should be for the customer.
Correct. Yeah.
So there's really nothing that they can do if they fall into that trap. They can't do anything to improve the crane, or it's basically
They're going to be in hell.
I mean, you can do extra maintenance. You can stay on top of the maintenance. You go above and beyond the normal maintenance recommendations, but it's still not going to last like it should.
you can modernize it.
You can
upgrade
do
it, but
some upgrades. You can do some things to help in the situation, but you're never going to really resolve it until you put the right duty cycle, right classification of hoist in there.
Yeah, I mean, if you're buying a magnet crane, right, and the crane wasn't designed for that impact load on that hoist for the magnet cycle, right? Because you're dropping, you're picking, you snag all the time, and
Continuous weight of the magnet as well.
correct. So just right there, we want to buy a magnet crane. Well, you get some guy that wants to sell it, and they didn't take that into account. Now you better have a good procurement person and buy a lot of spare parts because they're going to be going through them.
And that's what I was saying before is you can do a modernization on the crane and you can bring it up to whatever potential duty class that it's supposed to be. But wouldn't you have rather just bought the crane at that duty cycle to begin with, right? And then not have all the headaches? I don't know.
So let's talk about the trap of shopping on price. Maybe you know what crane you need. Maybe it's a little bit more expensive than what procurement wants to pay or higher ups want to pay. How can you have that conversation with someone to convince them that if we don't pay what we need to pay now to get this crane, we're going to be dealing with it, and paying for it in the future consistently?
Well, sometimes I've found that some of that is customer based. There are some customers that they look at now, they look at 2-3 years down the road, but they're not looking at a 10, 15, 20-year life cycle of a crane. And so if they're only considering, what my cost is going to be over the next 2 to 3 years, then a lot of times they're going to run into a price battle and who's cheapest. And that's the direction that I'm going to go, because at the end of the day, I only care what's going to be 2 years from now. And sometimes that's not the customers that we really want to go for. If you've got a customer that's looking at, hey, I'm interested in the entire life cycle of what this crane's going to do for me. I'm looking at being here for 20 years. You've got cranes that are still in service that have been up for 40 years and they're still serviceable. They're still solid, good cranes, and those cranes were sold right. You've got other cranes that were sold 6 months ago and they're wore out already. So it really depends on what the customer's long-term goals are with what they're trying to buy. And you sit down with the customer and you have that consultation and you really find out what their long-term needs are and what they're looking for. Sometimes selling that cheap crane is what the customer wants, and then it's up to us to make a decision if we want to go down that path or not.
Sometimes you got to let the girl walk away, right? Just let her go, right? Sometimes It's just, you got to let them find out and learn the hard way, right? Sometimes we learn things the hard way, right?
They'll be back, right?
They'll be back.
I
That's
can't
right.
tell you how many times I've said that. Right?
You're going to prove your
They'll be
point
back.
to them because
Yep.
they're going to say, man, you were right. 5 years ago, we were going to buy your crane. Your price was, $300,000 higher, and we couldn't get off that number. But now, man, we're going through.
We spent $500,000 trying
all
to make
the
it better.
time. Just,
And that's the thing, So I know that Tim and our crane side, we do an exceptional job as far as laying out our proposals, itemizing, and the way that, the benefits that we have as far as Mazzella is concerned. But the problem is that the majority of the contacts and customers, we'll give them a couple page worth of proposal, and the first thing they do is they turn to the second to last page or whatever, and they go, oh, well, it's X number of dollars for this crane. Your competitor was $10,000 cheaper. They didn't look through all of the benefits that we have given them and offered them, right? Based on, like I said before, their needs versus their wants, right? So we're actually giving them what they actually need. So that's the training that Tim has a hard time with, as far as my concern, or my thoughts anyway, is trying to get that across to him. Hey, look, this is everything that we're giving you, right, to make it a more better crane, right?
So I guess let's talk about comparing quotes, apples to apples versus apples to oranges. What should a customer be doing when they're comparing the quotes to make sure that they're getting the spec that they need?
So that just from my experiences alone, about maybe half the customers that I've dealt with don't even have a spec. They don't have any type of specification besides, I want a 25 or a 30-ton Class E crane. Go do your job, right? And we put that proposal together and we give it to them based on what we think they need, right? And then they're just looking at that bottom line, right? So the first thing would be and I've done it a couple of different times, is I've actually offered to help them write a specification, right? So that way you can have apples to apples, right? Instead of just willy-nilly, you end up with, Tim might go in there with a Class E, massive beast hoist, CE hoist, whatever he's got out in that proposal that's going to last them a lifetime, to where the other guy knows, hey, I'm going up against Tim and I'm going to give him, like he said before, a package hoist, and because there's no spec, right? It's just go do what you want to do. So again, helping them generate and create that proposal or that specification to be able to go out there and get that out and get those apples to apples quotes. That's one of the best things that we can do.
A big thing is commercially available parts, right? So if you're looking at proposals, right, and a lot of people, if they have a spec, a lot of people will put in there that they want the parts that they're buying on that crane to be able to be commercially available, right?
Nothing proprietary, right?
Nothing proprietary, right? That gearbox is made by a company that you can buy that gearbox from. It's available to the customer. So when they're reviewing that quote, they're looking, okay, well, your price is higher. Okay, well, does the other guy have commercially available parts? What kind of drawings are they giving you, right? So that is in the price already. So that is an added bonus for the customer. So when they're reviewing the proposals, you kind of have to take that into account, right?
I think you really have to start with an understanding of what they're going to do with the crane. It was like, to Jim's point, they call up and say, hey, I need a 25-ton crane. Well, a 25-ton crane is not just a 25-ton crane. If they're picking 5 tons with that crane all of the time, but 3 times a year they need to pick 25 tons, that's a totally different crane than a crane that's picking 25 tons 25 times a day. And so you got to really understand what they're doing with the crane, so then you can design around what their true needs are. And then
true duty cycle, right?
Then you build into the duty cycle of what the gearboxes are able to continually run versus the motors, what they're able to do, and the controls and bearings and all of those factors that go into that true duty cycle. And that's really the catch that most people get trapped by is they're, there's a huge difference between a 25-ton Class C crane and a 25-ton Class E crane.
So I want to dig in a little bit more into the OEM parts versus commercially available parts. How do you know when you're getting a proposal if your parts on your crane are commercially available that you can replace out?
Whether or not it's a Mazzella crane or not.
Yeah, I mean, usually on proposals, like when I do my proposal, it says right on there that we offer commercially available parts, right? And it's the job as a salesperson, right, to explain to their customer this fact, right? What kind of drawings are you getting? So that's all communication that you have with the customer to inform them of what you're offering. It's a huge added bonus to have commercially available parts. It's probably the biggest. If I was buying a crane, it'd be the biggest factor that I would have, because I don't want one day when the other crane company, they get bought up by somebody, right? And not to mention any names, but that crane company then has you're beholden to them, and you never even wanted to buy from them in the first place. But now you're stuck forever until you replace that crane with dealing with somebody else to buy the parts.
Can you get locked into a service agreement with that company as well if they if they don't have commercially available parts, if they're all parts that you can only get from the manufacturer?
They try to, but that typically forces the hand away from them, right? So the customer doesn't like being forced. And I speak that from experience, right? Some of the companies that I worked for before, they were everything was proprietary, right? So you try and go in and you say, hey, look, it's proprietary parts, and we'd really like for you to just come with us, sign the service agreement. And they're like, absolutely not. I'll sign the agreement. Give me all the drawings. Right. They try and negotiate that way, and it never works.
And not all drawings are equal. Right. So some people will give you a drawing of a shiv. It's just a shiv. There's no dimensions. They don't have material on there. They don't tell you if it's heat treated. They don't tell you anything about it, because from that drawing they give you, you cannot get that made. Right.
It's a general arrangement versus a detailed drawing.
Right. Yeah. We do drawings that we have specific things on that drawing. Every dimension's on there. It's a fabrication drawing for us, right? And we give that to the customer. They have it. So if they can't get it from us fast enough, because we have our own machine shop, but if we can't produce it fast enough, they can go to another producer and get it made. And it's a huge added bonus.
Biggest thing that I always tell customers, or even potential customers, right, when I explain that fact, is we want you to come back to us because you want to, not because you have to. So
what are some of the best designed mill duty cranes that you've seen out there, and what set them apart from other cranes?
Mazzella cranes, and it's their paint scheme. They're yellow.
The yellow?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ease of service, right? Because that's what makes a crane functional for maintenance people, right? In these plants, in these steel mills, when they have to change a wire rope, you do not want to make it hard for them. Let's have that shiv nest exposed so they can have a guy up on the trolley, pass the rope up to him, he can pass it right back down to the guy, and it's just, that is the thing, is ease of service. It sets cranes apart.
Worst one I've ever been on, Tim, and I won't tell you the name, but it's a steel mill. The ladle crane, the main hoist shivs are underneath the main hoist motors.
Yeah, just makes no sense.
You have to pull the gearbox, the motor, just to get to the shivs to change the shiv. Right?
Yeah.
It was horrible.
It's terrible. I mean, why would somebody do that?
Yeah, didn't even think about it at all.
Right?
Yeah,
so
that's
simple things like that.
Yeah, from a service and maintenance perspective, that's really the biggest separator is ease of service by far. Because that ease of service means reduced downtime. Because the faster you can make that repair or make that change, the faster you get that crane back in service and back online and in production. And downtime costs money.
Yeah, and when they have down days, right, they only have so many hours to get that crane inspected, serviced, and back up. So if they have to mess around with the rope for 2 extra hours, well, that's 2 hours that they can't use the crane to pull roll, change a bearing on a roll line. All these things are, and that's when you get pissed off customers, because they're like, this is so hard to deal with, and yeah, I mean, serviceability is and parts is the number one game. I mean,
so how can they, when they're shopping for a crane, how can they know if their crane's easily serviceable? How do they know if they're getting a hard to service crane or not?
Approval drawings.
Yeah,
detailed approval drawings. If somebody understands maintenance of the crane, they can look at the drawings and see, hey, if I've got to change the oil in that gearbox, I've got more than that much room to get the fill tube in.
I'm gonna have to rig up this hose or something to get it.
It's easy to access drain plugs and fill plugs. It's easy to access where the gearbox is bolted down. If you're having to do a complete gearbox change, is the drum connected to the gearbox? And when you take the gearbox off, your drum's going to fall, so you got to support it. Do you have a drive shaft going through the drum so that you've got extra stuff that you've got to battle when you're doing those maintenance items? All of those kinds of things come into play, and your drawings a lot of times will show those.
Yeah, the big thing for us, what I try to do with my customer, we model everything, 3D model all of our cranes, right? So we sit down and we have a Teams meeting or a meeting in person, and we go over that model. We have an engineer there in the meeting, and he can flip that model all around. You can get on the crane, see from different angles. Hey, let's look underneath, right, from the bottom view, right? Because that's really, usually you got a guy in a man lift, and he's got to, change that rope or change a bearing in a ship. Well, let's get underneath. Okay, well, I don't like that, okay, because that's going to be in our way. So what can we do? And that is the key. Get your supplier to show you the 3D model, and that really helps.
Do we do that on every crane?
Most of the time, yep. Almost every time.
Is that with SolidWorks?
Yep, SolidWorks. And we can send them a step file of the model, and they can play with it. They can put it into their building if they're designing a new building. I have one customer, they used VR goggles, right? And they actually got into the model and were walking around on the crane in the model, and they were sitting in the cab so they could see what they can see view-wise. It was pretty amazing. So that right there was just, hey, I look to my right, and this window isn't quite big enough. Can we move this? And that was all because we gave them the model to look at.
That's a customer that you want.
Yep.
So what are some other things that Mazzella can do to help with uptime versus our competition?
Well, I would say this. So the easiest thing we can do to add value to a crane, and it's not a lot of money, is upsize the bearings so you get more bearing life, right? A lot of times, certain things, you get 10,000 hours of required bearing life. I can go up one bearing size, all of a sudden that number shoots up to 60,000 hours, right? And it costs $100. People really care about service factors and bearing life, and because it's going to make the crane last longer, run better, and so that's an easy one right there.
Yeah, and then on the back side of that, you're keeping up with the routine maintenance. Inspections obviously are a requirement, but the maintenance a lot of times is not required. But without the maintenance, it's kind of like driving your car 100,000 miles without changing the oil. You'd never think about doing that. But nobody thinks about, or a lot of people, I say, don't think about changing the oil in their gearboxes. And that's something that it's needed. And so, following those manufacturers' recommendations for those based on hours of usage and service life and those kinds of things, those are really critical to making you sure that you get the full life expectancy out of that crane.
All right, so we talked about a lot of things that you can do to help keep the crane running smoothly. If you had one tip, most important tip, what would it be to pass on to the customer?
To keep an existing crane running smoothly or a new one?
Either. What do you think is the most important thing when it comes to cranes that you keep in mind when you're
Number one is maintenance, right? And that's a strict maintenance schedule, right? And that's all based on, again, your duty cycle, right? So depending on where you're at, I'm the mill guy, right? So depending on where you're at in the mill is how frequently you're on that crane and what you're actually doing. When I worked at the mill, we actually had it broke down for the hot metal cranes. We were on hot metal cranes every 3 days, right? And that was a religious thing. It was every 3 days we were on both hot metal cranes. Right. So like I said, depending on what they're actually doing and where they're at and how much time you spend on them and what you can do to them, that's gonna give you more uptime. More uptime means more production.
Yeah, definitely maintenance is the key. It's like Jim said. I mean, you take a crane that the more critical the crane is, the more maintenance you should be doing on it. And a lot of times customers don't want to give up that crane to do maintenance. And so they try to stretch it and
because
go
it's so
farther
critical.
because it's so critical. But you've got to work in that maintenance. That's what's going to keep the crane running.
Yep. Hiring a quality service company or training your own people to be up to date with codes and just following CMAA guidelines and AIST guidelines and just keeping up with the service and making sure you're getting quality inspections, because you don't want just people out there pencil whipping reports. And, it's the easiest way to stay away from problems with your crane.
You listed everything except for OEM specifications, right? And their recommendations for maintenance. That's a big one too, because a lot of people forget about that, right? Just what he talked about earlier, based on your bearing life, right? If you don't know what's going on and which size bearings you got, you don't know how often you're supposed to grease them and go through that stuff. So,
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining. You can get a hold of Kevin, Jim, Tim, or myself, or any of our other experts at MazzellaCompanies.com. We've got a ton of information in our Learning Center on overhead cranes, from downloads, podcasts, videos, articles, whatever you need to help you make sure you're getting the right crane and making sure that you're keeping uptime your top priority. Thanks for listening. Stay safe out there.